This week, Loki premieres on Disney+. Yes! So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much, and I'm a massive MCU fan, so anytime we get something new from the MCU, naturally, I'm pumped. Disney sent out the first 2 episodes of the show to critics. Now, to give you a little bit of background on my particular feelings about this specific show, I've been highly skeptical about the entire concept of doing a Loki show because obviously he was killed off in Avengers Infinity War, and I think inherently it's frustrating when you kill someone off and then immediately announce that you're gonna do a TV show based off of that character. So I had my skepticism going into it, but a lot of the trailers they've been putting out over the last few months have really started to win me over. Did the actual first 2 episodes click with me? I'll let you know in just a second. But first, join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, once you've seen it, what did you think about it? What's your anticipation level? How does it compare to the other debuts of these Marvel Disney Plus shows? I'd love to hear your take on it. And let's get started talking about the good. And right off the bat, I'll say this. Of the 3 Marvel Disney Plus premieres we have up to this point in time, I think this is the one that best establishes what the show is about, while building intrigue, showing how it's different and unique inside of the MCU, while still being accessible. With WandaVision, that show's premiere was like jumping into the deep end of a pool and you don't know what's going on. So it built intrigue, but it wasn't the most accessible. And then with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it felt very reminiscent of Captain America and the Winter Soldier, but it took a long time to really establish where the show was going, and it felt like it was meandering for a long time. This one, right out of the gate, you get the tone, the vibe, the sense of humor. It clearly establishes what we're trying to do with this show, what the threat is, and what they're trying to use Loki to do in the main plot line. You get how it's different, how it adds to the MCU, how it's going to tie into Phase 4, and why it would be very important. But it's also Loki. The story picks up right with that scene in Avengers Endgame. And so there's a nice, easy bridge straight into the show, while being very different from anything else we've seen in the MCU up to this point in time. So without question, of these 3 premieres, this is the one that hooked me the quickest. And at the end of the first episode, I couldn't wait to watch the second. And when the second was over with, I was like, oh man, I have to wait 2 more weeks to see what's gonna happen next. Excellent. And I think a big reason for that is that the first 2 episodes play a lot more like a traditional pilot and then second episode. The first episode does a lot of world building. As I mentioned before, we pick up right where we last saw this Loki, and then it tries to establish all the rules of this world we're in and these time police type characters and what they're supposed to do, who these characters this Loki will be interacting with, who are they. And then the second episode kind of kicks into more kind of the mission, the type of vibe that the show's going to be about. So they give you an episode to get nice and situated in this world and understand the rules of it all, and then they send you off on an adventure. And then the heart and the soul of this show is the dynamic between Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson.
Makes you sound super smart. I am smart. I know.
And it is just so much fun to see these 2 characters sparring back and forth with their witty little banter. Now, of course, we've spent a lot of time with Tom Hiddleston as Loki, and as you're watching this, you have to just keep thinking in your mind, the Battle of New York in the first Avengers was just like 2 days ago, a day ago. For this version of Loki, it's that version of him that's at the heart of his mischievous and evil. That's where we're picking up with his lead character. And then you have Owen Wilson doing all of his kind of charm, swagger, knowing he's talking to a Loki that doesn't understand what's going on all around him and how he's kind of out of his depths in this time realm thing that they're in. And there's just so much fun to watch them going back and forth, and both of them are great at it. Both of their timing is just on point, and each of them kind of represents different worldviews. That's one of the things I really wasn't expecting from this. This is the most philosophical stuff we've ever gotten in the MCU, as it's talking about free will, fate, determination, purpose, and it goes into a bunch of different things like that as these two characters are bantering back and forth, and it comes off like two guys sparring with one another who are both charming and fun, so it's entertaining while also touching on some pretty deep stuff. Along those same lines, it's also one of the most psychological things we've ever gotten in the MCU, as it is very overtly all about trying to figure out what makes Loki tick and psychoanalyzing him for the purposes of these characters and this adventure that they're trying to take him on. So you're just diving into this character who at the same time is pushing back against Owen Wilson's character and trying to get underneath his skin and figure out what makes him tick. And adding to the freshness of all of this, the main plot line is this investigation into something going on in the timeline, and so they're looking for clues, trying to find ways to track someone down and figure out what needs to happen. And so it's a type of story we haven't seen quite like this in the MCU, while also having a lot of depth in its handling of the ideas of this world and multiverses and what would all of that mean, while making it very personal to the characters too. Another nice little touch in the execution is that in the TVA, the time space that they're at, it has all this space age technology, but it all has this 70s aesthetic to it.
Sign this too.
The look of things, the type of printers that they use, even the animations, the cartoons they use to teach Loki about this world, all of it has this 70s vibe to it. There's just this nice little touch that makes everything a little bit more interesting and just pop. And finally, even though we're 23 movies and multiple TV shows into the MCU, it does a bunch of world building surrounding the time streams and the time lords that all makes you fascinated as to how all of this is going to play out, which sets the stage for a story that you're actually interested in, with lots of intrigue, both for this adventure that this version of Loki is on, as well as for what on earth is going to happen with the rest of Phase 4, in particular when we know all the rumors about Spider-Man No Way Home, when you have multiverse in the title of the next Doctor Strange movie. We know they're going to wild, crazy places. And this show is all about multiverse, variants, breaches in the time stream, and what holds it all together. And so immediately you're fascinated and want to know more about this place they're in, how time works, and how all of this is going to play out. So the show gets you hooked while you're watching it, and then both episodes end with a twist reveal where you're like, oh, I've got to see the next episode right now. So I went into this one very skeptical, with a lot of issues, but being won over by the trailers a bit. Of the 3 Disney Plus Marvel premieres, without question, this is the one that hooked me the most, and I got fully invested in immediately.
Excellent!
From there, let's move on to the mixed aspects of the series. And these aren't necessarily good or bad things. These are just things to know going into the premiere. Right off the bat, the first episode is 50 minutes. The second episode is 53 minutes. And this is very much a dialogue-driven, investigative show with a deep mythology to it. It's not an all-out action show. The first episode really doesn't have much of any action in it. The second episode has a little bit more, but you have to go into it knowing that this is about the characters, the world, and the investigation more so than big, gigantic action set pieces. From there, let's move on to the bad. And the first thing that comes to mind here is the show is a bit too slow. In particular, the first episode, just a lot of characters sitting there talking. And it's good dialogue, it's interesting, it adds depth, it explores ideas, but they're long scenes and you start being like, okay, when are we gonna move on to what's next? And the second episode speeds that up. It's not quite as bad, but even in the second episode, there's a lot of long scenes of people in one location sitting there talking. Second thing that comes to mind, besides Loki, most all the other characters are TVA agents, and they're all pretty one-dimensional. Even Owen Wilson's character, who's fun, charming, has a personality, and he's interesting, his worldview is fairly singular, and then all the other TV agents are just kind of one-note characters up to this point in time. They don't trust Loki. Like that's kind of their whole characters. And so hopefully they can flesh it out and give them a bit more depth as we go along. And the final two things I want to mention here aren't necessarily things that these two episodes did wrong, but they're weaknesses of the show in light of the MCU as a whole. First one is that ever since Endgame, the MCU has been teasing us with multiverse. And so they teased us in the marketing and in Spider-Man Far From Home that Mysterio was from the multiverse, and then he wasn't. And then we watched WandaVision, and there's all sorts of teases that this could be multiverse. We think Evan Peters is going to be from the Fox universe, and then it wasn't. And you get a little bit of that fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you kind of going on of they're teasing the multiverse once again, and it's tough to get as excited as I was getting before when we've already played this game and it didn't go anywhere. As it seems, they're actually building this concept of variance, and this seems like when they're really doing it, but you already fooled me before with Evan Peters, so I'm not quite sure if I trust you this time that we're actually going somewhere with this. Other one in this kind of category is, as I mentioned before, inherently, I think bringing back Loki after killing him is kind of cheap and lazy. It feels like they don't trust future new characters, and so who is someone that they can still get to give a TV show? The premise of the show about the idea of variance, time streams, it provides a good reason. It's interesting. Of all the ways to bring him back, this is about as good as you could do. But inherently, when you kill him off and bring him back and kill him off and bring him back and keep doing that, it cheapens death in your continuity. And so I think there's inherently for the MCU as a whole problems with the concept of bringing Loki back after so definitively killing him. It just hurts the MCU as a whole, even though they did as good of a job as possible as you can do bringing him back. Real quick, before I give you my final thoughts, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think? How are you feeling about the show? How does it compare to the other premieres? Also, tomorrow I'll be back with my spoiler-filled review and walkthrough where I'll talk about the specifics, watch it again, write tons of notes down, talk through all the stuff that will debut after you've already seen it. I went into this show as a skeptic and it absolutely won me over. Of these three Marvel Disney Plus premieres, without question, this was my favorite of the bunch, the one that did the best job of being accessible while doing something new and immediately hooking me and making me want to see the next episodes immediately. I definitely recommend it. It gets the 2 thumbs up. If you're a Marvel fan, check this one out. If you like time travel, if you like weird, quirky sci-fi, if you like buddy shows with witty banter, it's got all of that fun stuff. Maybe a little bit slow compared to some other MCU things. Besides that, you want to check this one out. Be sure to come back tomorrow for my spoiler-filled walkthrough where I'll talk about all the specifics. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies, TV, and Marvel too much.